The wedding was public. The vows were sacred. The celebration was real. But 24 hours later, behind a closed door, the preacher discovered something that had never been disclosed. Something so fundamental, it shattered the marriage instantly. What he uncovered that night wasn't just a secret. It was a truth hidden until it could no longer be escaped. And once it surfaced, there was no way to put this story back into silence. Kelly Cross was 34 years old when his life changed forever. He was an associate pastor at Abundant Grace Ministries, a thriving black evangelical church in the heart of Atlanta. The congregation knew him as a man of conviction, someone who didn't compromise on his beliefs. He led deliverance sessions, casting out what the church called demonic oppression. He preached with fire, with certainty, with a kind of authority that made people either love him or fear him. His sermons were direct, unfiltered, and often controversial. He didn't apologize for his positions, and he didn't soften his language to make people comfortable. But Kelly hadn't always been this way. Before he turned 26, he lived what the church called in the world. He partied hard, drank too much, dated women without thinking about consequences. He moved from relationship to relationship, chasing pleasure without purpose. His early 20s were a blur of nightclubs, hookups, and empty mornings. He wasn't proud of it, but he wasn't ashamed either. It was just who he was back then. He worked a corporate job during the day and lived for the weekends. His friends knew him as the guy who could always find a party, always had a woman on his arm, always had a story to tell on Monday morning. Everything changed one night after a particularly bad breakup. He found himself alone in his apartment, drunk and angry, wondering what the point of any of it was. The woman he thought he loved had left him for someone else. His friends had stopped calling as much. His family barely spoke to him anymore. He looked around his apartment, empty bottles, unpaid bills, clothes thrown everywhere, and realized he was wasting his life. A friend dragged him to a church service the next Sunday. Kelly went reluctantly, hungover and irritated. But something happened that morning. The pastor talked about wasted years, about men who knew better, but chose worse. Kelly felt like the message was written specifically for him. Every word landed like a punch to the chest. He gave his life to Christ that day. It wasn't a small decision. It was a complete overhaul. He quit drinking within a week. He stopped going to clubs. He ended all his casual relationships and made a vow to stay celibate until marriage. His friends thought he had lost his mind. They mocked him at first, sent him invites to parties he no longer attended, called him boring. But Kelly didn't care. He threw himself into the church, studying theology at night after work, attending every service, volunteering for every ministry. Within 2 years, he was offered a position as associate pastor. By 30, he was one of the most respected voices in the church. People looked up to him. They asked for his advice. They wanted him to pray over their problems. He became the model of transformation, the living proof that God could turn a life around. But his transformation came with a cost. Kelly became rigid. He saw his old life as a warning, a trap he had barely escaped. He preached against sin, with the intensity of someone who knew exactly what it looked like. And when it came to certain issues, he didn't hold back. Kelly was outspoken against what he called modern deceptions. He believed gender was fixed at birth, assigned by God, unchangeable. He called transgender identity a spiritual lie, a rebellion against divine order. He didn't whisper these beliefs in private conversations. He preached them from the pulpit, loud and clear, Sunday after Sunday. He wasn't quiet about it either. He preached entire sermons on the topic, quoting scriptures, building arguments, making his position impossible to misunderstand. He called out church members who expressed support for LGBTQ+ causes. One Sunday, a young woman in the congregation posted something online about accepting transgender individuals. Kelly addressed it from the pulpit the following week. He didn't name her directly, but everyone knew who he was talking about. He said the church couldn't afford to compromise on truth, that acceptance of sin was the same as participation in sin. She left the church shortly after. Others followed. Some families walked out during his sermon. Kelly didn't apologize. He believed he was protecting the truth, defending the faith, standing firm when others compromised. There was one incident that people still talked about years later. A young man in the congregation began questioning his gender identity and confided in one of the church counselors. Word got back to Kelly within days. He confronted the young man privately at first, in his office after a Wednesday night service. The conversation lasted 2 hours. Kelly quoted scripture, explained biblical manhood, urged the young man to reject what he called demonic confusion. The young man left in tears. When he returned the following Sunday, Kelly called him forward publicly. He didn't explain the situation to the congregation, just asked everyone to pray for deliverance. The young man stood at the altar while Kelly and several elders laid hands on him, praying loudly, commanding spirits to leave. The young man never came back. His family left too. Some members of the congregation felt Kelly had gone too far, that he had humiliated someone who needed compassion. Others praised him for taking a stand, for refusing to let the culture corrupt the church. The church leadership backed him every time. Pastor James, the senior pastor, was a father figure to Kelly. He had mentored him through his early years in ministry, helped him navigate the transition from partier to preacher. Pastor James was 58, a man with graying temples and a calm, steady presence. He rarely raised his voice, but when he spoke, people listened. He believed in discipline, in structure, in maintaining biblical standards. And he believed Kelly was one of the most gifted young ministers he had ever seen. Pastor James saw Kelly's past as an asset, not a liability. The man knew temptation, knew sin, knew what it took to walk away from it. That made him effective in ministry. That made him relatable to people who were struggling. Pastor James often told the congregation that Kelly was proof that God specializes in turning messes into messages. But by the time Kelly turned 34, the church leadership started applying pressure of a different kind. A pastor must be the husband of one wife, they reminded him. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a requirement, at least in their interpretation of Scripture. They brought it up in leadership meetings, during one-on-one conversations, even in passing after services. Pastor James was gentle but persistent. He told Kelly that marriage would complete his ministry, that it would give him credibility with married couples, that it would open doors for him to counsel families. Kelly prayed about it constantly. He wanted to be obedient, but he was also cautious. His past relationships had all ended badly. He didn't trust his own judgment when it came to women. He didn't trust that he could pick the right person. So he waited. He prayed. He asked God to make it obvious. He needed a sign, something clear and undeniable. He wasn't going to make the same mistakes he made in his 20s. This time, if he got married, it would be God's choice, not his. He dated briefly during his first few years in ministry. There was a woman named Rhonda who sang in the choir. She was kind, attractive, serious about her faith. They went on a few supervised dates, had a few conversations about their future, but something always felt off to Kelly. He couldn't explain it. He just didn't feel at peace. He ended things after 3 months. Rhonda was hurt, but understanding. Then there was Vanessa, a school teacher who attended the Saturday morning prayer meetings. They talked for a while, exchanged phone numbers, went to coffee a few times, but Kelly felt the same unease. He broke it off before it got serious. After that, he stopped trying. He told the leadership he was waiting for God to bring the right woman to him. He wasn't going to force it. He wasn't going to settle. If God wanted him married, God would have to make it unmistakably clear. And then, in a way he never expected, God seemed to answer. Before you continue this story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and share this video. These stories take time and research to bring to you, and your support keeps this channel going. Now let's continue. Abundant Grace Ministries held healing services every other week. These weren't small gatherings. The sanctuary would be packed with people seeking prayer, deliverance, breakthrough. Kelly led most of these sessions. He would walk through the aisles, laying hands on people, praying over them, sometimes shouting commands at what he believed were demonic forces. It was intense, emotional, exhausting work. People came from all over Atlanta for these services. Some drove hours just to be prayed for by Kelly Cross. They believed he had a gift, a special anointing, a direct line to God. Word had spread through churches across the city. Kelly's reputation as a deliverance minister was growing. People brought family members who were struggling with addiction, depression, sexual sin. They brought friends who needed healing, neighbors who needed prayer. The services often lasted 3 or 4 hours. Kelly would be drenched in sweat by the end, his voice hoarse from praying. That particular Friday, a woman Kelly had never seen before walked into the service. Her name was Lucy Hall. She was 29 years old, quiet, reserved, dressed in a long skirt and a modest blouse. She sat in the back row, hands folded in her lap, eyes downcast. She didn't raise her hand when Kelly asked who needed prayer. She didn't come forward during the altar call. She just sat there, watching, waiting. The service went on for 2 hours. People cried, shouted, fell to the floor under the weight of prayer. Lucy stayed in her seat the entire time, barely moving. A few people sitting near her tried to talk to her, ask if she needed prayer, but she shook her head politely. She seemed afraid, unsure, like she wanted to leave, but couldn't bring herself to walk out. At the end of the service, as people were leaving, Lucy approached one of the ushers, an older woman named Sister Bernice who had been with the church for decades. Sister Bernice was known for her warmth, her ability to make newcomers feel welcome. Lucy whispered something to her, and Sister Bernice nodded. She led Lucy through a side door, down a hallway, and into one of the smaller meeting rooms. Then she came back out and found Kelly. She said there was a young woman who needed deliverance but didn't want to do it publicly. Kelly was tired, ready to go home, but he agreed. He never turned down someone who needed prayer. That was his calling. That was his purpose. He walked into the meeting room and found Lucy sitting in a chair, her hands shaking slightly. He introduced himself, sat down across from her, and asked what she needed prayer for. Lucy looked down at her hands. She said she had been dealing with spiritual oppression for years. She felt trapped, like she couldn't be who she was supposed to be. She didn't go into details. Kelly didn't ask. He had heard similar testimonies dozens of times before. People came to these services carrying all kinds of burdens: shame, guilt, confusion, fear. He didn't need to know the specifics to pray. He just needed to know they wanted help. He prayed over her for about 15 minutes. He rebuked spirits of confusion, spirits of bondage, spirits of oppression. He asked God to set her free, to bring clarity, to restore her identity in Christ. Lucy sat there with her eyes closed, tears streaming down her face. When Kelly finished praying, she thanked him quietly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She stood up, wiped her eyes, and left. Kelly watched her go, then grabbed his things and headed home. He didn't think much of it. She was just another face in a long line of people seeking help. He had no idea he would ever see her again. 2 months passed. Kelly didn't see Lucy at any services. He assumed she had gone to another church or maybe stopped attending altogether. People came and went all the time. Some found what they were looking for and moved on. Others disappeared without explanation. It was part of ministry. You prayed for people, did your best to help them, and then released them to God. You couldn't track everyone. You couldn't follow up with every person who walked through the doors. There were too many. The church was growing too fast. But then Kelly had a dream. It wasn't vague or symbolic. It was clear, vivid, almost cinematic. In the dream, he was standing at an altar wearing a black suit. Lucy Hall was standing next to him in a wedding dress. They were getting married. He could see the faces of the congregation, could hear the music, could feel the weight of the moment. Pastor James was officiating. The choir was singing. People were clapping. Lucy was smiling at him, holding his hands. The dream felt real, more real than most dreams. He could feel the texture of her hands, the warmth of the room, the weight of the ring in his pocket. When he woke up, he was disturbed. His heart was racing. He sat up in bed, disoriented, trying to shake the images from his mind. He barely knew this woman. He hadn't thought about her since that night 2 months ago. Why would he dream about marrying her? It didn't make sense. He had never dreamed about any of the women he dated. He had never dreamed about marriage at all. But this dream was different. It felt intentional, like someone was trying to tell him something. He tried to dismiss it. Dreams were just dreams, he told himself. His subconscious was probably processing random information. Maybe he had been thinking about marriage more than he realized, and his brain just attached a random face to the thought. But the dream stuck with him. He couldn't shake it. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lucy's face. It bothered him enough that he mentioned it to a close friend in the church, a deacon named Gerald who had been married for 20 years. Gerald was practical, grounded, not the type to overreact. Kelly told him about the dream, asked what he thought it meant. Gerald said it could be God speaking, or it could just be his mind working through things. He told Kelly to pray about it, to ask God for clarity. If it was really from God, it would become clear. If it wasn't, it would fade. Kelly did. He spent hours in prayer, asking God what the dream meant, but the dream didn't go away. If anything, it became more vivid. He started seeing Lucy in his mind during the day, during sermons, during worship. It was unsettling. He began to wonder if he was losing his mind. Then, 3 weeks after the dream, Pastor James pulled Kelly aside after a Sunday service. They walked into Pastor James's office, and the older man closed the door behind them. His face was serious, more serious than usual. He told Kelly to sit down. Kelly obeyed, confused. Pastor James rarely called private meetings unless something important was happening. Pastor James sat across from him, hands folded on the desk, and said something that would change Kelly's life forever. "The Holy Spirit spoke to me about you," Pastor James said. His voice was calm, certain, the way it always was when he believed he had heard from God. "He told me that Sister Lucy Hall is your wife." Kelly froze. His mouth went dry. He didn't know what to say. He hadn't told Pastor James about the dream. He hadn't told anyone except Gerald, and he was certain Gerald hadn't spoken to Pastor James. Gerald wasn't the type to gossip or spread information. This was impossible. And yet, here it was. 2 witnesses, the dream and the prophecy. In the evangelical world, that was as close to a direct message from God as you could get. Kelly's mind raced. How could Pastor James know? How could he have received the same message independently? Unless it really was God. Unless this really was divine confirmation. Pastor James continued. He said he had been praying for Kelly for months, asking God to reveal the right woman for him. The church leadership had been concerned about Kelly's singleness, worried that it was limiting his ministry effectiveness. Pastor James had taken it to God, made it a priority in his prayer time. One morning during his prayer time, Lucy's name came to his mind. He dismissed it at first, just like Kelly had dismissed the dream. But it kept coming back. Every time he prayed for Kelly, Lucy's face appeared in his mind. He prayed about it for weeks, asking God for confirmation. And then, he said, the Holy Spirit gave him peace. This was the will of God. Lucy Hall was meant to be Kelly's wife. Pastor James explained that he had wrestled with the revelation because he didn't know Lucy well. She was a newer member of the church, quiet, kept to herself. She attended services regularly but didn't join any ministries. She didn't volunteer. She didn't participate in church activities. She just showed up, worshiped, and left. But the Holy Spirit had been insistent. The message was clear. This was a divine match. Pastor James said he had even fasted for 3 days to make sure he wasn't making a mistake. He didn't want to give Kelly bad counsel. He didn't want to push him into something that wasn't from God. But after the fast, The conviction only grew stronger. Kelly sat there, stunned. He wanted to argue, to push back, to say this didn't make sense. He barely knew Lucy. He hadn't felt any attraction to her. He hadn't even thought about her since that night 2 months ago, except for the dream. But how could he argue with a prophecy? How could he question what Pastor James was telling him, especially when it lined up with his own dream? The timing was too precise. The details were too specific. This couldn't be a coincidence. Kelly had prayed for clarity, and now he had it. 2 witnesses, 1 dream, 1 prophecy, both pointing to the same woman. In his theology, in his understanding of how God worked, this was undeniable proof. Pastor James leaned forward. "When God confirms something through 2 witnesses, you don't question it," he said. "You obey." He reminded Kelly of biblical precedents, stories of arranged marriages, of God choosing spouses for his servants. He talked about Isaac and Rebekah, about how Abraham sent a servant to find the right woman. He talked about how the servant prayed for a sign, and God provided it. He talked about obedience, about trust, about stepping out in faith even when it didn't make sense. Kelly listened, his heart pounding. He felt trapped. He believed in submission to spiritual authority. He believed in the prophetic. He believed that God used dreams and visions to speak to his people. And now, according to Pastor James, God was speaking. Kelly couldn't ignore it. He couldn't walk away. He had to obey. But he still had questions. He asked Pastor James what he knew about Lucy. Where was she from? What was her background? Did she have family in the area? Pastor James admitted he didn't know much. She had filled out a visitor card when she first attended, listed an address in East Atlanta, but that was about it. She had gone through the new members class, been baptized, joined the church officially, but she kept to herself. She wasn't one of the social members. She didn't linger after services. She didn't attend the fellowship dinners. Pastor James said he would ask Sister Regina to reach out to her, to get to know her better. But he emphasized that Kelly shouldn't let a lack of information stop him from obeying God. If God said this was his wife, then it was his wife. The details would work themselves out. The church leadership was brought into the conversation. Pastor James called a special meeting with the elders and deacons. They met privately in the church boardroom on a Tuesday night. Kelly sat at the table while Pastor James explained the situation. He told them about the prophecy, about Kelly's dream, about the divine confirmation. Some of the leaders asked questions. They wanted to know more about Lucy, about her background, about her spiritual walk. One of the elders, Brother Marcus, said he had noticed her at services but had never spoken to her. Another elder, Brother Vincent, asked if anyone had done a background check. Pastor James said no, but that it wasn't necessary. God had spoken. The dream and the prophecy were enough. Not everyone was comfortable with it. One of the deacons, Brother Lawrence, expressed concern. He said they should at least talk to Lucy, get to know her, make sure she was on the same page. He said they couldn't just arrange a marriage without her input. Pastor James agreed that Lucy's consent was important, but he believed God had already prepared her heart. He reminded the leadership that God doesn't call one person without preparing the other. If Kelly was supposed to marry Lucy, then Lucy was supposed to marry Kelly. The two were connected. The elders debated for over an hour. Some wanted to move cautiously. Others believed they should trust the prophecy completely. In the end, they voted. The decision was unanimous. This was a divine alignment. Kelly Cross was supposed to marry Lucy Hall. It was God's will, but he had no idea what he was walking into. Kelly approached Lucy after a Wednesday night service. She was standing near the back of the sanctuary, talking quietly with another woman. He walked up to her, his heart pounding, his mouth dry. He had rehearsed what he was going to say a dozen times, but now that he was standing in front of her, the words felt awkward and strange. He asked if they could talk privately. Lucy looked surprised but agreed. They stepped outside into the church parking lot. The night air was cool, and the parking lot was mostly empty. A few people lingered by their cars, talking and laughing. Kelly led Lucy to a quiet corner near the side entrance, away from the main crowd. Kelly didn't waste time. He told her the truth. He said he had a dream about the two of them getting married. He said Pastor James had received a prophecy that she was his wife. He said he believed God was leading them together. He watched her face as he spoke, trying to read her reaction. For a moment, she just stared at him. Her eyes went wide, and her mouth opened slightly. Then her eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth with her hand, shaking her head like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then she started crying. Not quiet, polite tears. Deep, shaking sobs that made her whole body tremble. She doubled over slightly, like the weight of what he said had physically hit her. Kelly panicked. He stepped forward, unsure if he should touch her shoulder or just stand there. He asked if she was okay, if he had said something wrong. Lucy shook her head, unable to speak at first. She tried to catch her breath between sobs. Finally, she looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. She said no, it wasn't wrong. It was the opposite. She had been praying for this. She had been asking God for years to send her someone who would love her, someone who would accept her. And now here it was, an answer to her prayers. She couldn't stop crying. She kept saying thank you, over and over, like she was talking to God instead of Kelly. She put her hands over her face, her shoulders shaking. Kelly stood there, unsure what to do. He offered her a tissue from his pocket. She took it, wiping her eyes, but the tears kept coming. She looked at him like he was the answer to everything she had ever wanted. Her gratitude was overwhelming, almost uncomfortable. Kelly didn't know what to make of her reaction. It seemed extreme, but he chalked it up to emotion. Some people cried when they were happy. Maybe this was one of those moments. He asked if she was willing to pursue a relationship with him, to see if this was truly God's will. Lucy said yes immediately. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask for time to think about it. She just said yes, over and over, like she was afraid he might change his mind if she stopped talking. She grabbed his hands, holding them tightly. Her hands were cold, trembling. She looked up at him with so much hope in her eyes that it made Kelly uncomfortable. He gently pulled his hands back, reminding her that they needed to follow the church's courtship rules. No physical contact before marriage. Lucy nodded quickly, apologizing. She wiped her face again, tried to compose herself. She said she would do whatever he wanted, follow whatever rules the church required. She just didn't want to lose this opportunity. She said she had waited so long for someone like him. Someone who would see her, who would choose her. Kelly didn't fully understand what she meant, but he nodded. He told her they would take it slow, follow the process, and see where God led them. The church celebrated. News of the prophesied union spread quickly through the congregation. People approached Kelly and Lucy after services, congratulating them, praying over them, declaring that this was a match made in heaven. The older women in the church called them a power couple. They said Lucy was blessed to have a man like Kelly, and Kelly was blessed to have such a humble, godly woman. The younger members looked at them with envy. Everyone believed this was something special, something ordained. Some people even said they had seen it coming, that they had noticed the way God was moving in both of their lives. It became the talk of the church. Every service, someone mentioned it. Every prayer meeting, someone prayed for them. Sister Regina took Lucy under her wing. She invited her to lunch, to coffee, to her home for dinner. She wanted to get to know the woman who was about to become Kelly's wife. But even Sister Regina found Lucy hard to read. Lucy was polite, grateful, always smiling. But she didn't share much. When Sister Regina asked about her family, Lucy said they had passed away. When Sister Regina asked about her childhood, Lucy said it was difficult and she preferred not to talk about it. When Sister Regina asked about her job, Lucy said she worked in data entry for a small company downtown. The conversation never went deep. It stayed on the surface. Sister Regina mentioned it to Pastor James. She said Lucy seemed sweet but guarded. Pastor James said that was normal for someone with a traumatic past. He told Sister Regina to be patient, to give Lucy time to open up. Kelly tried to get to know her. He asked about her life, her family, her past. But Lucy was vague. When he asked about her childhood, she said she didn't like to talk about it. When he asked about her parents, she said they had passed away when she was young and she had been raised by relatives. When he asked who those relatives were, she changed the subject. She would smile and say something like, "That's all in the past now. God has given me a new beginning." It was a line she used often. Kelly noticed but didn't push. He figured she would open up eventually once they were married, once she felt safe. She never talked about friends from before the church. She never mentioned past relationships. She never gave details about where she had lived or what she had done before joining Abundant Grace. Every time Kelly tried to dig deeper, Lucy deflected. Once, during a coffee date with two other couples from the church, Kelly asked Lucy where she grew up. Lucy said she moved around a lot as a child. When he asked where specifically, she said it was complicated. One of the other women at the table tried to help, asking if Lucy had any siblings. Lucy said no, she was an only child. The conversation moved on. At first, Kelly attributed it to trauma. Maybe her childhood had been difficult. Maybe she was still processing grief from losing her parents. He didn't want to push. But as the weeks went on, the vagueness started to bother him. He felt like he was dating a stranger. He knew her favorite Bible verses, her prayer requests, her opinions on sermons, but he didn't know her. Not really. He didn't know what made her laugh, what scared her, what she dreamed about at night. He didn't know her stories, her history, the experiences that shaped her. Every conversation felt surface level. Every date felt rehearsed. She was always pleasant, always agreeable, always grateful. But she never let him in. There was a wall between them, invisible but real. He mentioned it to Pastor James during one of their weekly check-ins. They were sitting in Pastor James's office on a Thursday afternoon. Kelly said Lucy seemed evasive whenever he asked personal questions. He said he felt like he didn't really know who he was marrying. Pastor James leaned back in his chair, fingers laced together. He said Lucy had been through deliverance, that her past was buried under the blood of Christ. He said some people needed to leave their old lives behind completely in order to move forward. He told Kelly not to dig into things that God had already covered. Her past doesn't matter, Pastor James said. What matters is who she is now and who she's becoming in Christ. Don't let curiosity derail what God is doing. Kelly wanted to push back, but he didn't. He trusted Pastor James. If the senior pastor said it was fine, then it was fine. He told himself to stop worrying, to focus on the present, to trust the process. He told himself that marriage would bring them closer, that intimacy would break down the walls. He just had to be patient. But the unease didn't go away. It sat in the back of his mind, a quiet nagging feeling that something wasn't right. He ignored it. He prayed through it. He told himself it was just fear, just doubt, just the enemy trying to derail God's plan. 6 months into the courtship, Kelly proposed. He didn't do it privately. He did it during a Sunday morning service in front of the entire congregation. Pastor James had suggested it, saying a public proposal would be a testimony to the church, a celebration of God's faithfulness. Kelly agreed. He worked with the worship team to plan the moment. At the end of the service, after the final song, Pastor James called Kelly and Lucy to the front of the sanctuary. The congregation fell silent, sensing something special was about to happen. Kelly got down on one knee, pulled out a ring, and asked Lucy to marry him. The crowd erupted in applause before she even answered. Lucy was crying again, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. She covered her face with her hands, nodding yes through the tears. The church exploded in praise. People shouted, danced, clapped. It felt like a revival meeting. Kelly slipped the ring onto her finger and stood up. Lucy threw her arms around him, holding on like she was afraid to let go. The embrace lasted longer than it should have, considering the no contact rule, but no one corrected them. It was a special moment. The choir started singing spontaneously. People came forward to pray over them. It was a celebration, a moment of joy, a confirmation that God was at work. Kelly smiled, but inside he felt uneasy. He still didn't know her. He still didn't understand why she cried so much, why she was so desperate, why she seemed so relieved every time he affirmed his commitment. But it was too late to turn back now. The proposal was public. The date was set. The church was planning the wedding. He was locked in. Everyone was watching, waiting, expecting this union to happen. Kelly couldn't back out without looking like a fool, without disappointing the entire congregation, without questioning the prophecy that everyone believed came from God. So he smiled. He played the role. He told himself that everything would make sense after the wedding. Premarital counseling was required for all couples at Abundant Grace. Kelly and Lucy met with Pastor James and his wife, Sister Regina, every Saturday morning for 3 months. The sessions were held in a small conference room at the church. There was a table with 4 chairs, a whiteboard on one wall, and a bookshelf filled with marriage books and Bibles. Sister Regina always brought coffee and snacks. The sessions covered everything: finances, conflict resolution, spiritual leadership, roles in the household. They talked about expectations, communication, commitment. They talked about purity, about the sanctity of marriage, about honoring God in their union. Sister Regina was kind but firm. She had been married to Pastor James for over 30 years, and she took her role as a counselor seriously. She asked hard questions, pushed them to think about real issues, made them discuss topics most engaged couples avoided. She asked about money. Kelly said he made a modest salary from the church and had some savings. Lucy said she worked in data entry and lived paycheck to paycheck. Sister Regina asked if they had discussed how they would manage finances after marriage. They hadn't. She gave them homework, told them to create a budget together, to talk about spending habits and financial goals. She asked about conflict. How would they handle disagreements? What would they do if they couldn't agree on something? Kelly said he believed in communication, in talking things through. Lucy said she wasn't good at conflict, that she usually just went along with whatever the other person wanted. Sister Regina frowned. She said that wasn't healthy, that Lucy needed to find her voice, that marriage required 2 people, not 1 leader and 1 follower. Lucy nodded, but didn't say much after that. When it came to sex, the conversation was brief. Sister Regina explained that physical intimacy was a gift from God, reserved for marriage, meant to be enjoyed within biblical boundaries. She asked if either of them had questions or concerns. Kelly said no. Lucy said no. Sister Regina talked about the importance of patience, of communication, of learning each other's needs. She said the first few months of physical intimacy could be awkward, but that was normal. She encouraged them to pray together, to be gentle with each other, to remember that marriage was a lifelong commitment. The conversation lasted maybe 10 minutes. Then they moved on to the next topic. At one point, Pastor James asked about medical history. He wanted to know if there were any health issues that might affect the marriage. It was a standard question, one he asked every couple. He said it was important to be honest about health problems, about medications, about anything that might impact their life together. Kelly said he was healthy, no major issues. Lucy hesitated for a moment, then said she had undergone some surgeries in the past, but was healthy now. Pastor James asked what kind of surgeries. Lucy looked down at her hands, her voice quiet. She said they were private. Medical matters. Nothing that would impact the marriage. Pastor James paused, studying her face. He asked if she was sure. Lucy nodded. She said it was all taken care of, nothing to worry about. Sister Regina glanced at Pastor James. He nodded slightly, then moved on. The session ended shortly after. No one asked Lucy to elaborate. No one demanded details. The matter was dropped. Later, Kelly wondered if he should have asked more questions. But the moment had passed, and bringing it up again felt awkward. He told himself that if it was important, Lucy would tell him. He told himself that she wouldn't hide anything that mattered. He trusted her, or at least he tried to. The wedding was scheduled for June 14th. Invitations were sent out to over 300 people. The venue was booked at the church. Lucy picked out a dress from a bridal shop in Buckhead. It was white, elegant, with lace sleeves and a long train. Kelly ordered a black suit from a men's store downtown. The church buzzed with excitement. This was going to be the event of the year. a prophesied marriage, a union blessed by God, a testimony to the power of faith and obedience. The women in the church threw Lucy a bridal shower. Over 50 women attended. They played games, gave gifts, prayed over Lucy. Lucy cried through most of it. She thanked everyone repeatedly, said she couldn't believe this was happening, said she felt so blessed. The men threw Kelly a bachelor dinner at a steakhouse. It was more subdued, just good food and conversation. The men prayed for Kelly, gave him advice, told him marriage was hard work, but worth it. Kelly listened, nodded, smiled. But the unease never left. June 14th arrived with clear skies and warm weather. The church had been preparing for weeks. The sanctuary was decorated with white flowers, ribbons hanging from the pews, candles lining the altar. It looked like something out of a magazine. 250 guests filled the seats by noon. Family members, church members, people from other congregations who had heard about the prophesied union. Everyone wanted to witness what they believed was a divine event. The choir practiced their songs one last time. The ushers reviewed their assignments. The photographer set up his equipment. Everything was ready. Kelly stood in a small room behind the sanctuary, adjusting his tie for the third time. His hands were shaking. Brother Gerald stood next to him, talking about something Kelly couldn't focus on. His mind was somewhere else. He kept thinking about the dream, the prophecy, the way Lucy cried when he proposed. He kept wondering if he was making a mistake. But it was too late now. The guests were seated. The music was about to start. There was no turning back. He took a deep breath, said a quick prayer, and told himself this was God's will. That's what everyone kept saying. This was God's will. Lucy was in another room with Sister Regina and several women from the church. They had spent the morning getting her ready. Her hair was styled perfectly, pulled back with small white flowers woven through it. Her makeup was flawless. The dress fit her like it was made for her body. She looked beautiful. The women kept telling her that, kept saying how blessed she was, how this was the happiest day of her life. Lucy smiled and nodded, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Sister Regina noticed and grabbed her hands, squeezing them gently. She asked if Lucy was nervous. Lucy said yes. Sister Regina laughed and said that was normal. Every bride was nervous on her wedding day. But Lucy's nerves weren't normal wedding jitters. She was terrified. She had spent months preparing for this moment, convincing herself that everything would work out. She told herself that once they were married, once Kelly saw how much she loved him, the truth wouldn't matter. She told herself that love could overcome anything. But now, standing in that room in her wedding dress, she wasn't sure anymore. She thought about running. She thought about taking off the dress, walking out the back door, disappearing. But where would she go? What would she do? This was her only chance at the life she wanted. This was her only chance at being accepted, at being loved, at being seen as the woman she knew she was. She couldn't walk away now. The music started. The doors to the sanctuary opened. Lucy stood at the back with Pastor James, who was walking her down the aisle since she had no family. He offered his arm and she took it. They began walking slowly toward the front. Every eye in the room was on her. People smiled, some wiped tears, others whispered about how beautiful she looked. Lucy kept her eyes forward, focused on Kelly standing at the altar. He looked nervous too. That made her feel a little better. Maybe they were both just scared. Maybe that was okay. When she reached the front, Pastor James placed her hand in Kelly's and stepped back. Kelly looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment Lucy thought he could see right through her. But then he smiled, a small nervous smile, and she relaxed slightly. The ceremony began. Pastor James spoke about marriage, about covenant, about God's design for man and woman. He talked about the prophecy that brought them together, about obedience, about trusting God even when things didn't make sense. The congregation nodded along. Some said amen out loud. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a testimony. The vows came quickly. Kelly repeated the words Pastor James fed him. For better or worse, in sickness and health, "Till death do us part." His voice was steady but quiet. Lucy repeated the same words, her voice shaking. When it came time to exchange rings, Kelly's hands trembled as he slid the band onto her finger. Lucy did the same, sliding a gold band onto his finger. Pastor James declared them husband and wife, told Kelly he could kiss his bride. Kelly leaned in, and Lucy met him halfway. The kiss was brief, almost hesitant. Their lips barely touched. The congregation erupted in applause anyway. People stood, clapped, cheered. The choir started singing. It was done. They were married. The reception was held in the church fellowship hall. Tables were set up with white tablecloths, centerpieces made of flowers and candles. There was food, fried chicken, mac and cheese, greens, cornbread, all the traditional soul food dishes. There was a cake, 3 tiers decorated with white frosting and sugar flowers. A DJ played music, old gospel songs mixed with clean R&B. People danced, ate, laughed. Kelly and Lucy sat at a head table, greeting guests as they came by to congratulate them. Lucy kept smiling, kept thanking people, kept playing the role. But inside, her stomach was in knots. Several people gave speeches. Pastor James spoke first, talking about how God had orchestrated this union, how it was proof that God still spoke to his people. He talked about Kelly's transformation, about how he had gone from a man living in sin to a man leading others to Christ. He said Lucy was the perfect partner for him, that God had prepared her specifically for this purpose. The congregation applauded. Other church leaders spoke, sharing stories about Kelly, praying blessings over the marriage. One woman prophesied that they would have many children, that their home would be a light to the community. Lucy felt sick hearing that, but kept smiling. The dancing started after the speeches. Kelly and Lucy had their first dance to a slow gospel song. Kelly held her awkwardly, unsure where to put his hands. They swayed back and forth, not really dancing, just moving. Lucy rested her head on his chest and closed her eyes. For a moment, she let herself believe this was real, that this could work, that maybe he would understand. But the moment passed quickly. The song ended and other couples joined them on the floor. The energy in the room shifted to something more joyful. People were celebrating, having fun, enjoying the party. Lucy watched Kelly interact with the guests. He looked more relaxed now, laughing with friends, accepting congratulations from church members. She watched him and felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that he seemed happy. Fear about what was coming. Guilt for what she hadn't told him. Love for the man who had chosen her, even if he didn't know the whole truth. She told herself again that it would be okay. She told herself that he loved her enough to accept her. She told herself that marriage would change everything. As the reception wound down, people started leaving. They hugged Kelly and Lucy, told them to enjoy their honeymoon, made jokes about the wedding night that made both of them uncomfortable. Sister Regina pulled Lucy aside and gave her a knowing smile. She said the first night could be awkward, but to relax, to communicate, to remember that they had their whole lives to figure things out. Lucy nodded, unable to speak. Her throat felt tight. Finally, it was time to go. Kelly and Lucy said their final goodbyes and walked out to Kelly's car. People lined up outside, throwing rice, shouting blessings, waving as they drove away. The hotel was downtown, a nice place Kelly had booked weeks ago. They had decided against an immediate honeymoon because Kelly had responsibilities at the church. They would take a trip later, maybe to the Bahamas or somewhere tropical. For now, they just had this one night. The drive was quiet. Kelly kept his eyes on the road. Lucy stared out the window, watching the city pass by. Her hands were in her lap, fingers twisted together. She wanted to say something but didn't know what. The silence felt heavy. When they pulled up to the hotel, a valet took the car. Kelly grabbed their bags from the trunk, and they walked into the lobby. The check-in process was quick. The clerk congratulated them, said she could tell they were newlyweds, upgraded them to a suite for free. Kelly thanked her and took the key cards. They rode the elevator to the 8th floor in silence. When they reached their room, Kelly opened the door and stepped aside to let Lucy enter first. The suite was beautiful. There was a living area with a couch and a TV, a bedroom with a king-size bed, a bathroom with a jacuzzi tub. The hotel staff had set up rose petals on the bed, champagne on ice on the nightstand, soft music playing from a speaker. It was romantic, perfect, everything a wedding night should be. Lucy walked into the room slowly, taking it all in. Kelly followed, closing the door behind him. They stood there for a moment, not sure what to do next. Finally, Kelly set the bags down and said he was going to take a shower. Lucy nodded. He disappeared into the bathroom and she heard the water turn on. Lucy sat on the edge of the bed, her heart racing. This was it, the moment she had been dreading and anticipating for months. She thought about the plan she had made. Let him discover naturally. Don't say anything. Let the physical intimacy happen first. Create a bond, and then explain afterward. But sitting there in that room, the plan felt stupid. How could she let him discover like that? How could she not tell him? But if she told him now, he might leave. He might refuse to consummate the marriage. He might call the whole thing off. She couldn't risk that, not after coming this far. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Atlanta spread out below her, cars moving through the streets, people living their lives, unaware of what was happening in this hotel room. She felt alone. More alone than she had ever felt in her life. She thought about calling Simone, her best friend, the only person who knew the truth. But what would she say? Simone had warned her about this. Simone had told her to be honest before the wedding. Lucy hadn't listened. Now she was paying for it. Kelly came out of the bathroom wearing a t-shirt and basketball shorts. His hair was wet, his face clean. He looked younger somehow, less like a preacher and more like the man he used to be. He smiled at Lucy, a nervous smile. He said the shower was free if she wanted to use it. Lucy nodded and grabbed her bag, pulling out the nightgown Sister Regina had given her. It was white, modest, appropriate for a Christian wedding night. She walked into the bathroom and closed the door. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her makeup was still perfect. Her hair was still styled. She looked like a bride. But underneath the dress, underneath the makeup, underneath everything, she was still Moses Hall. She had changed her name, changed her body as much as she could afford, changed her life. But some things couldn't be changed. Some things were permanent. She thought about telling him right now, walking back out there and confessing everything before anything happened. But fear stopped her. Fear of rejection. Fear of being alone again. Fear of losing the one person who had chosen her. She took off the wedding dress carefully, hanging it on the back of the door. She showered quickly, the hot water doing nothing to calm her nerves. She dried off, put on the nightgown, brushed her teeth. She stared at herself in the mirror one more time, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Kelly was sitting on the bed, the TV on but muted. He looked up when she entered. He stood, turned off the TV, and walked toward her. This was it. There was no more time, no more chances to tell the truth. Lucy felt her chest tighten, felt like she couldn't breathe. Kelly reached for her hand, and she let him take it. He pulled her toward the bed. They sat down together. He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. He asked if she was okay. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He said they didn't have to rush anything, that they could take their time. Lucy wanted to scream. She wanted to tell him everything, but she didn't. She just nodded again. Kelly leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative. Then it deepened. Kelly's hands explored Lucy's body, moving down from her waist to her thighs. He was trying to be gentle, trying to make this comfortable for both of them. But then his hand moved between her legs, and he felt something he didn't expect. Something hard. Something that shouldn't be there. He froze. His entire body went still. For a second, he thought maybe he was confused. Maybe he wasn't touching what he thought he was touching. But then, he moved his hand again, felt more carefully, and there was no mistaking it. He pulled his hand back like he had touched fire. Lucy's eyes were closed. She knew. She knew the moment he felt it. She knew everything was about to fall apart. She opened her eyes and saw the look on Kelly's face. Confusion first, then shock, then something worse. Horror. He pulled back from her, creating distance between them on the bed. His breathing was heavy. He stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find words. Finally, he managed to get something out. "What is that?" His voice was barely above a whisper, shaking. Lucy didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat was closed up, her mind blank. Kelly stood up from the bed, backing away further. "Lucy, what is that?" He said it louder this time, more forceful. Still, she didn't answer. Kelly reached over and turned on the bedside lamp. The room flooded with light. He looked at her, really looked at her, and said it again. "What the hell is that?" Lucy started crying. She pulled the nightgown down, trying to cover herself, but it was too late. He had felt it. He knew. Kelly's face was red now, his hands shaking. "Answer me!" he shouted. Lucy flinched. She had never heard him yell like that before. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Kelly took a step closer, his eyes wild. "What is between your legs, Lucy?" She finally found her voice, though it came out weak and broken. "Kelly, please, let me explain." He laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of humor. It was harsh, bitter. "Explain? Explain what? Why you feel like a man?" Lucy shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not a man. I'm a woman. I've always been a woman." Kelly stared at her like she was speaking another language. "What are you talking about?" Lucy took a shaky breath. She had practiced this conversation in her head 100 times. But now, sitting here in this hotel room with Kelly looking at her like she was a stranger, she couldn't remember any of the words she had planned. "I was born male," she said quietly. "But I'm not male. I'm a woman. I've always been a woman. I transitioned before we met. I've been living as a woman for years." Kelly just stared at her. The words weren't making sense to him. Or maybe they were making too much sense. "You were born male," he repeated slowly. Lucy nodded. "You're a man." Lucy shook her head violently. "No, I'm not a man. I'm transgender. I'm a woman who was assigned male at birth." Kelly's face twisted. "Assigned? You mean you were born with a penis?" Lucy flinched at the word but nodded. "Yes, but—" Kelly cut her off. "You're a man. You're a biological man." Lucy stood up from the bed, reaching for him. "Kelly, please, I can explain everything. I should have told you sooner, I know that. But I was scared. I thought if you knew before we got married, you wouldn't—" Kelly stepped back, away from her reach. "Wouldn't what? Wouldn't marry you? You're damn right I wouldn't have married you." His voice was getting louder, echoing in the small room. "You lied to me! You lied to everyone!" Lucy was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. But I'm still the same person. I'm still the woman you fell in love with." Kelly laughed again, that same bitter sound. "Fell in love with? I didn't fall in love with you. I married you because Pastor James said God told him to. Because I had a dream. Because everyone said it was God's will. And the whole time, you were lying." He started pacing the room, his hands in his hair, pulling at it. Lucy watched him, not knowing what to say, not knowing how to fix this. Kelly turned back to her suddenly. "How long have you known that you... He couldn't even finish the sentence. Lucy wiped her face. "I've known my whole life. I started transitioning when I was 22. I had surgery, hormone therapy. I legally changed my name when I was 24. Kelly stopped pacing. He was staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "What was your name? Your real name?" Lucy hesitated. She didn't want to tell him. That name felt like a different person, a different life. But she had no choice now. Moses, she said quietly. Moses Hall. The name hung in the air between them. Kelly repeated it. Moses. You were born Moses Hall. Lucy nodded. Kelly's face was going through emotions too fast to track. Shock, disgust, rage. Moses, a man's name, because you're a man. Lucy shook her head again. I'm not a man, Kelly. I never was. I was just born in the wrong body. Kelly exploded. Wrong body? What the hell does that even mean? God doesn't make mistakes. You were born male because you are male. Lucy tried to speak, but Kelly kept going. I preached against this. I preached against this exact thing. I told the church that transgender ideology was a lie, that it was demonic deception, and the whole time I was courting one, I was marrying one. He sat down on the couch, his head in his hands. Lucy stayed where she was, standing by the bed, not sure if she should move closer or stay away. After a long silence, Kelly looked up at her. His eyes were red. Who else knows? Lucy swallowed. My friend Simone. She's known since before I joined the church. Kelly's jaw clenched. So you told your friend, but not your husband. Not the man you were about to marry. Lucy took a small step forward. I wanted to tell you. So many times I wanted to tell you. But I was scared. I thought if I told you, you'd leave. I thought if we got married first, if you loved me first, then maybe it wouldn't matter. Kelly stood up so fast it made Lucy jump back. Wouldn't matter. Wouldn't matter. We stood before God. We stood before my entire congregation. We made vows, and you knew the whole time that you were lying. Lucy was crying so hard she could barely breathe. I wasn't lying about loving you. I do love you. That's real. Everything between us was real. Kelly shook his head. Nothing between us was real. Nothing. You built this entire relationship on a lie. You let me believe you were something you're not. He walked to the corner where their bags were and started pulling out his clothes. Lucy watched in horror. What are you doing? Kelly didn't look at her. I'm leaving. Lucy moved toward him. Kelly, please don't leave. We can talk about this. We can work through this. Kelly spun around, his face twisted in anger. Work through this? You think we can work through you being a man? I'm not a man! Lucy screamed it this time, her voice breaking. I'm a woman. I've lived as a woman. I am a woman. Kelly grabbed his bag and headed for the door. Lucy followed him, grabbing his arm. Please don't go. Please. We just got married. We can figure this out. We can... Kelly jerked his arm away from her. Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again. He opened the door and walked out. Lucy stood in the doorway, watching him walk down the hall toward the elevator. Kelly, please, she called after him. He didn't turn around. He didn't look back. He just kept walking. The elevator doors opened and he got in. Lucy watched the doors close, watched the numbers light up as the elevator descended. And then he was gone. She stood there for a moment, in the doorway of the hotel room, still wearing the white nightgown, tears running down her face. Then she walked back inside, closed the door, and collapsed on the floor. She sobbed, loud and uncontrollable, her whole body heaving. Everything she had worked for, everything she had hoped for, was gone. She had lost him. She had lost everything. Hours passed. Lucy cried until she had no tears left. She moved from the floor to the bed, curling up in a ball, still wearing the nightgown. Her phone was buzzing with texts and calls, but she ignored them. She didn't want to talk to anyone. She didn't want to face what she had done. She just wanted to disappear. Outside the hotel window, the sun started to rise. It was morning. Her wedding night was over, and so was her marriage. Kelly drove aimlessly for an hour. He didn't know where he was going. He just drove, his mind racing, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. The city was quiet at this hour, most people still asleep. He kept replaying the moment over and over in his head. The feeling of his hand touching something that shouldn't have been there. The realization, the horror. The way Lucy tried to explain it like it was something normal, something acceptable. He felt sick. His stomach was churning. He pulled over to the side of the road and threw open the car door just in time to vomit onto the pavement. He stayed there for a moment, bent over, breathing hard, trying to steady himself, But the nausea wouldn't go away. Neither would the images in his head. He had touched a man. He had kissed a man. He had married a man. The thought made him vomit again. When he finally felt like he could drive again, he got back in the car and pulled out his phone. It was almost 2 a.m. He didn't care. He called Pastor James. The phone rang several times before a groggy voice answered. "Kelly? What's wrong?" Kelly's voice came out choked. "I need to see you. Now." Pastor James was immediately more alert. "What happened? Are you okay?" Kelly couldn't even begin to explain over the phone. "Please, just meet me at the church. I need to talk to you." There was a pause, then Pastor James agreed. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." Kelly ended the call and drove to the church. When he arrived, the parking lot was empty. He parked near the front entrance and waited. His mind kept going back to the hotel room, to Lucy crying, to her saying she was a woman, to her using words like transgender and assigned male at birth. It all felt like a nightmare, like something that couldn't possibly be real. Pastor James pulled up 15 minutes later. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, his gray hair messy from sleep. He got out of his car and walked over to Kelly, concern all over his face. "What happened? Where's Lucy?" Kelly got out of his car and stood there, not sure how to even begin. Pastor James put a hand on his shoulder. "Come inside. Let's talk." They went into the church through a side door. Pastor James led Kelly to his office, turned on the lights, and gestured for Kelly to sit. Kelly sat, but he couldn't stay still. His leg bounced up and down, his hands fidgeted. Pastor James sat across from him, waiting. Finally, Kelly spoke. "Lucy isn't a woman." The words came out flat, emotionless. Pastor James frowned. "What do you mean?" Kelly looked up at him. "She was born male. She's transgender. She never told me." Pastor James just stared at him. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then Pastor James shook his head slowly. "That can't be true." Kelly laughed, but there was no humor in it. "It is true. I found out tonight. On our wedding night. I found out because I touched." He couldn't finish the sentence. Pastor James leaned back in his chair, his face going pale. "Are you sure? Maybe you were mistaken. Maybe—" Kelly cut him off. "I'm not mistaken. She admitted it. She told me everything. She was born Moses Hall. She transitioned when she was 22. She's been living as a woman for years, and she never told me. She never told any of us." Pastor James stood up and started pacing his office. "This can't be happening. This can't be real." Kelly watched him, feeling a strange sense of validation. At least someone else was as shocked as he was. At least he wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed. Pastor James stopped pacing and looked at Kelly. "What did she say? How did she explain this?" Kelly recounted the conversation, as much as he could remember through the haze of anger and shock. He told Pastor James about Lucy saying she was scared, that she thought marriage would make it okay, that she loved him. Pastor James listened, his expression getting more and more serious. When Kelly finished, Pastor James sat back down. "She deceived you. She deceived all of us. She infiltrated this church under false pretenses." Kelly felt the anger building again. "I preached against this. I stood in that pulpit and preached against transgender ideology. I called it demonic deception. And the whole time, she was sitting in the congregation. She heard every word. And she still went through with it. She still let you prophesy over us. She still married me." Pastor James was shaking his head, his hands pressed together like he was praying. "The prophecy. I received a word from God. How could God tell me to marry you to... He couldn't finish. Kelly felt something twist in his chest. He had been thinking the same thing. How could God tell them to do this? Unless God hadn't told them anything. Unless the whole thing was a lie from the beginning. Pastor James must have seen something in Kelly's face because he quickly added, We need to pray. We need to seek God on this. There has to be an explanation. But Kelly wasn't interested in praying right now. He was interested in answers. He was interested in justice. I want an annulment, he said. Pastor James nodded. Of course. We'll help you with that. I'll call the church lawyer first thing in the morning. Kelly stood up. I want her out of the church. Pastor James looked up at him. What? Kelly's voice was firm. I want her removed from membership. I want her banned from this building. She doesn't belong here. She lied to all of us. Pastor James hesitated. Kelly, I understand you're angry, but we need to think about this carefully. We need to... She made a fool out of me, Kelly's voice echoed through the office. She made a fool out of you. Out of this entire church. We have to do something. Pastor James stood up. We will. I promise you we will. But we need to handle this wisely. We need to think about the church. About how this will look. About... Kelly cut him off again. I don't care how it looks. I care about the truth. And the truth is that Lucy lied. She manipulated everyone. She needs to be held accountable. Pastor James nodded slowly. Okay. We'll convene the leadership. We'll address this. But Kelly, you need to rest. You need to take some time to process this before we make any decisions. Kelly didn't want to rest. He wanted to burn everything down. But he was exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, and all that was left was a bone-deep tiredness. He agreed to go home, to try to sleep, to meet with Pastor James and the leadership later in the day. He left the church and drove to his apartment. When he got there, he saw his phone had dozens of missed calls and texts. Most were from Lucy. He didn't read them. He blocked her number and collapsed onto his bed fully clothed. He didn't sleep, though. He just lay there, staring at the ceiling, his mind going in circles. He thought about the wedding, about standing at that altar, about kissing her in front of everyone. He thought about all the times they had talked, all the conversations where she could have told him the truth but didn't. He thought about the counseling sessions, about the medical history question she had dodged. It had all been right there. The signs had been there, and he had missed them. Or maybe he had chosen not to see them. By the time the sun came up, Kelly had made a decision. He wasn't going to let this go quietly. He wasn't going to hide what happened. Lucy had made this public when she married him in front of the entire church. Now the church needed to know the truth. He got up, showered, and called Pastor James. He told him to schedule an emergency leadership meeting for that afternoon. Pastor James agreed. Kelly then called his friend Donald Ashford, a lawyer he had known since college. Donald answered on the third ring. Kelly, congratulations on the wedding. How's married life? Kelly's voice was flat. I need a lawyer. There was a pause. What happened? Kelly gave him the short version. Donald listened without interrupting. When Kelly finished, Donald was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Did she disclose her biological sex before the marriage? Kelly said no. Donald made a sound like he was thinking. That could be grounds for annulment. Possibly fraud. Kelly felt a small sense of relief. Can you help me? Donald said yes immediately. Come by my office this afternoon. We'll start the paperwork. Kelly thanked him and ended the call. Things were moving now. He was taking control. He wasn't going to be a victim in this. He was going to fight back. Meanwhile, Lucy was still at the hotel. She had finally gotten up off the bed and taken a shower. She stood under the hot water for a long time, crying until there were no tears left. When she got out, she checked her phone. All her texts to Kelly had gone undelivered. He had blocked her. She felt panic rising in her chest. What was she supposed to do now? Where was she supposed to go? She called Simone. Her friend answered immediately, sounding worried. Lucy, where have you been? I've been calling you. Lucy's voice was hoarse. He knows. Kelly knows. There was silence on the other end. Then Simone said quietly, What happened? Lucy told her everything. The wedding night, the discovery, the fight, Kelly leaving. Simone listened, occasionally making sympathetic sounds. When Lucy finished, Simone sighed. I told you to tell him before the wedding." Lucy started crying again. I know you did. I thought it would be different. I thought he'd love me enough to accept me." Simone's voice was gentle but firm. "Lucy, you didn't give him a choice. You trapped him. Of course he's angry." Lucy knew Simone was right, but she didn't want to hear it. She wanted someone to tell her it would be okay, that Kelly would come back, that they could fix this. But Simone couldn't tell her that because it wasn't true. "What do I do?" Lucy asked. Simone thought for a moment. "Come stay with me for now. Get out of that hotel. We'll figure out the rest later." Lucy agreed. She packed her things, took off the wedding dress and put on regular clothes and checked out of the hotel. The clerk who had upgraded them the night before looked confused to see her leaving alone but didn't ask questions. Lucy got in her car and drove to Simone's apartment on the other side of town. When she arrived, Simone opened the door and pulled her into a hug. Lucy broke down again, sobbing into her friend's shoulder. Simone held her, let her cry, and then led her inside. They sat on the couch and Simone made tea. Lucy told her everything again, in more detail this time. Simone listened, her face sad. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry this happened. But Lucy, you have to face reality. This marriage is over. He's not coming back." Lucy shook her head. "Maybe if I give him time? Maybe if I explain it better?" Simone cut her off. "No, you need to accept this. It's over." Lucy felt like the walls were closing in. Everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, was gone. And it was her own fault. She had known the risk. She had known this could happen. But she had taken the chance anyway. And now, she was paying the price. Back at the church, the leadership meeting was underway. Pastor James had called in all the elders and deacons. They sat around the conference table, looking confused and concerned. Pastor James explained the situation. When he got to the part about Lucy being transgender, several of the men gasped. Others looked skeptical. One elder, Brother Vincent, said, "Are we sure about this? Maybe there's been a misunderstanding." Kelly, who was sitting at the table, spoke up. "There's no misunderstanding. She admitted it. She told me herself." Brother Vincent looked uncomfortable. "Okay, but how do we handle this? What do we do?" Pastor James folded his hands on the table. "We need to address it publicly. The church needs to know what happened. We can't let this stay hidden." Some of the leaders agreed. Others were hesitant. Brother Lawrence, one of the deacons, said, "If we expose her publicly, it's going to get ugly. People are going to take sides. The media might get involved." Pastor James nodded. "I know, but we don't have a choice. This is a matter of truth. We have to stand on the truth." The discussion went on for over an hour. They debated how to handle it, what to say, when to say it. Finally, they agreed. They would address it during the Sunday service, 5 days from now. Kelly would speak, tell the congregation what happened. Lucy would be given a chance to respond, but only briefly. Then the leadership would vote on her membership. It was decided. The plan was set. Now they just had to wait. Word started leaking out anyway. People talked. Rumors spread. By Wednesday, half the church had heard something. Most didn't believe it. They thought it was gossip, slander against Sister Lucy. But a few people started asking questions. Why hadn't anyone seen Kelly and Lucy since the wedding? Where were they? Why weren't they at Wednesday night service? The speculation grew. By Friday, everyone knew something was wrong. They just didn't know what. Lucy stayed at Simone's apartment, hiding from the world. She didn't go to work. She didn't answer her phone except when Simone called. She just stayed in bed, staring at the wall, replaying everything in her head. She kept thinking about what she should have done differently. She should have told him before they got engaged. She should have told him before the wedding. She should have been honest from the beginning. But it was too late now. The damage was done. Sunday morning arrived. The church was packed. Over 600 people filled the sanctuary. Everyone could feel that something big was about to happen. Lucy decided to come. Simone tried to talk her out of it, but Lucy insisted. She needed to face this. She needed to at least try to explain. So she got dressed, drove to the church, and walked in through the back entrance. She sat in the very last row, head down, hoping no one would notice her. But people noticed. Whispers started immediately. "That's Sister Lucy. What's she doing here? I thought she and Pastor Kelly were on their honeymoon. Something's wrong." Lucy ignored them, kept her eyes on the floor, and waited for the service to start. She didn't have to wait long. Pastor James walked onto the platform at exactly 11 a.m. The worship team had finished their set. The congregation was seated, Bibles open, ready for the message. But Pastor James didn't open his Bible. He stood at the pulpit, hands gripping the sides, his face serious. The room fell completely silent. "We gather today in truth," he began. His voice was steady but somber. "There has been a serious breach of trust within this body, something that affects all of us, something that requires us to stand on the Word of God, no matter how difficult it may be." People shifted in their seats. Some exchanged confused glances. Others leaned forward, sensing something major was coming. Pastor James continued, "Last Sunday, many of you attended the wedding of Pastor Kelly Cross and Sister Lucy Hall. It was a beautiful ceremony, a prophesied union. We all celebrated. We all believed God had brought them together." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But something happened on their wedding night, something that has shaken this church to its core. He gestured toward the side door. Kelly walked out. He looked terrible. His eyes were red, his face drawn. He hadn't been sleeping. He walked to the pulpit and stood next to Pastor James. The congregation watched, confused and concerned. What was going on? Where was Lucy? Kelly cleared his throat and began to speak. His voice was shaky at first, but grew stronger as he went on. "Many of you celebrated my marriage last week," he said. "You prophesied over us. You prayed for us. You believed, just like I did, that God had brought us together." He paused, his jaw clenching. "But on my wedding night, I discovered something that Sister Lucy had hidden from me. Something she had hidden from all of you." The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Kelly took a breath and said it. "I discovered that my wife was born male. She is transgender. She never told me. She never told any of us." The reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the congregation. Someone screamed. A woman in the third row stood up and shouted, "No, that can't be true." Others were shaking their heads, refusing to believe it. A few people stood up and walked out immediately, unable to even sit through the rest. Kelly waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "It's true," he said. "She admitted it to me. She was born Moses Hall. She transitioned years ago, and she never disclosed any of this before we got married." More gasps, more shouts. People were crying now, some from shock, others from anger. Lucy, sitting in the back, felt every eye in the room turning toward her. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. But she stayed in her seat, frozen. Kelly continued, "I don't share this to embarrass anyone. I share this because this church deserves to know the truth. We were all deceived. We all believed something that wasn't true. And now we have to deal with the consequences." Pastor James stepped forward. "The leadership has met. We have discussed this situation at length, and we believe that Sister Lucy needs to be held accountable. We invited her here today to give her a chance to speak, to explain herself." He looked toward the back of the room. "Sister Lucy, would you please come forward?" Every head in the sanctuary turned to look at Lucy. She sat there for a moment, unable to move. Then, slowly, she stood. Her legs felt like they might give out. She walked down the center aisle toward the front. People moved away from her as she passed, like she was contagious. Someone muttered, "Abomination," loud enough for her to hear. Another person said, "Jezebel's spirit." Lucy kept walking, tears streaming down her face until she reached the front. She stood next to the pulpit, facing the congregation. Hundreds of faces stared back at her. Some looked angry. Some looked disgusted. A few looked sad. Pastor James handed her the microphone. Her hand shook as she took it. She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I know I should have told you. I know I should have been honest, but I was afraid." A woman in the front row stood up. "Afraid? You brought sin into this church. You deceived a man of God." Lucy shook her head. "I didn't mean to deceive anyone. I just wanted to be loved. I wanted to be accepted. I thought if I told the truth, no one would want me." The woman wasn't satisfied. "You're a liar. You're a wolf in sheep's clothing." Others joined in, shouting similar accusations. Lucy tried to speak over them. "I am a woman. I've lived as a woman for years. I thought—" Pastor James took the microphone from her. "Sister Lucy, you say you're a woman, but you were born male. You have male anatomy. By biblical standards, you are a man." Lucy shook her head frantically. "No, I'm not. I'm transgender. I've always been a woman. I was just born in the wrong body." The congregation erupted. People were shouting now, some standing, others pointing at her. "There's no such thing as the wrong body. God doesn't make mistakes. This is demonic." Lucy tried to defend herself. "I'm not demonic. I'm just trying to live my truth. I thought love would be enough. I thought if Pastor Kelly loved me, the rest wouldn't matter." Kelly, who had been standing to the side, stepped forward. His face was hard. "Love? You don't know what love is. Love is built on truth. You built our relationship on lies. You manipulated me. You manipulated this entire church." Lucy turned to him, reaching out. "Kelly, please. I do love you. That's the truth. Everything else is complicated, but my love for you is real." Kelly stepped back, away from her reach. Don't touch me. Don't talk to me about love. You violated me. You made me complicit in something I've preached against my entire ministry. You made me a hypocrite." Pastor James stepped between them. "This is why we're here. This is why we need to address this as a church. The leadership has made a decision." He turned to face the congregation. "We move that Sister Lucy be removed from membership immediately. She deceived this body. She violated our trust. She has no place here." The congregation erupted in applause. People stood, clapping, shouting, "Amen." Only a few people sat quietly, looking uncomfortable with the whole spectacle. Lucy looked around the room, seeing the hatred, the disgust, the rejection. She had known it would be bad, but seeing it, experiencing it, was worse than she had imagined. She turned and started walking toward the exit. As she walked, people shouted at her, "Leave! Get out! You're not welcome here!" Someone threw a Bible. It hit her in the back. She kept walking. Another person stepped into the aisle, blocking her path. An usher had to move them aside. She finally reached the doors and pushed through them. Outside, she could still hear the shouting. She walked to her car, got in, and sat there sobbing. Her phone buzzed. It was Simone. "Get out of there. Come back to my place." Lucy didn't respond. She just started the car and drove. She didn't go to Simone's, though. She drove aimlessly, tears blurring her vision, not sure where she was going or what she was going to do. Inside the church, the service continued. Pastor James addressed the congregation, talking about the importance of truth, of discernment, of protecting the church from deception. Kelly sat on the platform, his head in his hands. He had done what he needed to do. He had exposed the truth. But he didn't feel better. He just felt empty, destroyed, like his entire life had been a lie. The service ended an hour later. People came up to Kelly, hugging him, praying over him, telling him they supported him. He nodded, thanked them, but he couldn't really hear what they were saying. His mind was somewhere else, on the hotel room, on the wedding night, on the moment everything fell apart. He knew this was just the beginning. The church knew now. But soon, everyone would know. and then things would get even worse. By Monday morning, the video was everywhere. Someone had recorded the confrontation on their phone. They uploaded it to social media. It went viral within hours. The headlines started rolling in. Pastor discovers wife is transgender on wedding night. Church expels trans woman after secret marriage. Faith versus identity, the case dividing America. News outlets picked it up. Cable news talked about it. Twitter exploded with opinions. Some people supported Kelly, said he was a victim of fraud. Others supported Lucy, said she was a victim of transphobia. The debate raged, and in the middle of it all were two people whose lives had been destroyed. The media attention was relentless. Within 48 hours, the story was on every major news network. The opinions were split down the middle. Conservative outlets framed Kelly as a victim of deception, a man who had been tricked into marrying someone who wasn't who they claimed to be. Progressive outlets framed Lucy as a victim of a transphobic church, a woman who was being punished for her identity. The truth, as always, was more complicated than either narrative, but nuance didn't drive ratings. Outrage did. Kelly's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews. His email inbox filled with messages from people he didn't know. Some offered support. Others sent hate mail, calling him a bigot, telling him he deserved what happened. He stopped reading them. He turned off his phone and locked himself in his apartment. But even that didn't provide much relief. News vans parked outside his building. Reporters knocked on his door at all hours. He stopped answering. Donald Ashford, his lawyer, called a press conference. He stood in front of microphones and cameras, reading from a prepared statement. My client, Kelly Cross, is a victim of fraud. He entered into a marriage contract based on fundamental misrepresentations. His wife, Lucy Cross, formerly known as Moses Hall, deliberately concealed her biological sex before the marriage. This is not about transgender rights. This is about informed consent. Mr. Cross was denied the opportunity to make an informed decision about who he was marrying. Reporters shouted questions. Does Mr. Cross believe transgender people should be required to disclose their status? Is he seeking criminal charges? Does he stand by his past sermons against transgender individuals? Donald held up a hand. Mr. Cross will not be taking questions at this time. He is focused on moving forward with an annulment and rebuilding his life. Thank you. He stepped away from the podium, ignoring the continued shouting from reporters. Lucy's life fell apart just as quickly. The video from the church service was everywhere. Her face was on the news. Her birth name was published. Her entire history was laid bare for the world to see. She lost her job within a week. Her boss called and said they couldn't keep her on, that the publicity was affecting the company. Lucy tried to argue, said they were discriminating against her, but the boss hung up. She went to her apartment to find an eviction notice on the door. The landlord had seen the news. He wanted her out. He didn't want that kind of person in his building. She moved in with Simone permanently. Simone's apartment was small, just one bedroom, but she made space. Lucy slept on the couch. She barely left the apartment. Every time she did, someone recognized her. They would shout things, call her names. Once, someone threw a drink at her in a grocery store. She stopped going out. She ordered groceries online. She stayed inside watching the news coverage, reading the comments on social media, torturing herself with the hatred directed at her. The online harassment was brutal. Her social media accounts were flooded with death threats. You should kill yourself. You're an abomination. I hope you die painfully. Lucy tried to ignore them, but they kept coming. Hundreds of messages every day. Some people found her phone number and called, leaving voicemails filled with slurs and threats. She changed her number twice. It didn't matter. They found the new one. Simone tried to get her to stop looking at the comments, to delete her social media accounts, to focus on taking care of herself. But Lucy couldn't stop. She felt like she deserved it. She had lied. She had deceived Kelly. She had brought this on herself. The guilt was overwhelming. She stopped eating properly. She stopped sleeping. She would lie on the couch at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in her head. What if she had told him before the wedding? What if she had been honest from the beginning? Would it have made a difference? Or would he have rejected her anyway? Meanwhile, Kelly was dealing with his own crisis. The church had rallied around him initially, offering support and prayer. But as time went on, some members started questioning him. Why hadn't he known? How could he not have discerned that something was wrong? He was supposed to have spiritual insight, spiritual gifts. Shouldn't he have sensed something? These questions hurt more than the supportive words helped. They confirmed Kelly's own doubts. Maybe he had failed. Maybe he wasn't as spiritually attuned as he thought. Maybe God hadn't spoken to him at all. He stopped going to the church. He couldn't face the congregation, couldn't face their questions and their judgment. Pastor James called him several times, tried to get him to come back, but Kelly refused. He started seeing a therapist, a Christian counselor recommended by Donald. The sessions were difficult. Kelly had to talk about things he didn't want to talk about. The wedding night, the feeling of betrayal, the sense that his body had been violated without his consent. In one session, the therapist asked him how he felt about Lucy now. Kelly sat there for a long time before answering. "I hate her," he finally said. "I hate what she did to me. I hate that she made me part of this. I hate that my life is ruined because of her lies." The therapist wrote something down. "Do you think about her often?" Kelly laughed bitterly. "I can't stop thinking about her. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face. I see that hotel room. I see the moment I realized what she was." The therapist asked if he had thoughts of harming Lucy. Kelly hesitated before answering. He did have thoughts, violent thoughts, thoughts of confronting her, of making her feel the pain she had caused him. But he said no. He lied. He wasn't going to admit to a therapist that he fantasized about hurting her. That would make him look crazy. The therapist seemed satisfied with his answer and moved on. The legal proceedings moved forward. Donald filed for annulment, citing fraud and misrepresentation. Lucy hired a lawyer too, a woman named Andrea Hollins who specialized in LGBTQ+ rights cases. Andrea argued that gender identity was a protected characteristic, that Lucy had broken no laws, that disclosure of medical history was not required for marriage. The case became a legal battleground, with both sides arguing over what constituted fraud, what constituted consent, and whether transgender individuals had a legal obligation to disclose their status before marriage. The media covered every development. Legal analysts weighed in, offering opinions on both sides. Some said Kelly had a strong case, that Lucy's non-disclosure amounted to fraud. Others said the case would set a dangerous precedent, that it would require transgender people to out themselves in every relationship, potentially putting them in danger. The debate raged on, and neither Kelly nor Lucy had any peace. LGBTQ+ activists held counter-protests, arguing that Lucy was being persecuted for her identity. The two groups clashed at times, shouting at each other, the police having to step in to keep things from getting violent. Kelly watched the protests on TV from his apartment. He saw people holding signs with his face on them, calling him a hero, a victim, a man standing up for truth. He didn't feel like any of those things. He felt broken. He felt like his life had been stolen from him. He felt like no matter what happened with the annulment, he would never be whole again. The rage inside him grew. It wasn't just at Lucy anymore. It was at everyone. At Pastor James for the false prophecy. At the church for pressuring him to marry. At God for allowing this to happen. At himself for being stupid enough to believe it was all divine. He started having trouble sleeping. When he did sleep, he had nightmares. He would wake up in a cold sweat, his heart racing, the images from the wedding night fresh in his mind. He started drinking, something he hadn't done since before his conversion. It helped numb the pain temporarily. But when he sobered up, the pain came back worse. He stopped going to therapy. He stopped answering Donald's calls. He just sat in his apartment, drinking, watching the news coverage, and letting the rage consume him. One night he got a text from an unknown number. It was Lucy. She had gotten a new phone and his number somehow. The message was simple. I'm sorry. I know you hate me. I hate myself too. I just wanted you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I loved you. I still do." Kelly stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed out a response. "You destroyed my life. You took everything from me. I will never forgive you." He hit send and blocked the number. But the rage didn't go away. If anything, it intensified. He started thinking about Lucy constantly, obsessing over what she had done, replaying conversations, analyzing every moment of their courtship for signs he had missed. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. She had planned this. She had known exactly what she was doing. She had manipulated him, manipulated the entire church. And now she was out there living her life, while his was destroyed. He started following her online, using fake accounts to track her social media. He saw that she had moved in with Simone. He found out where Simone lived. He drove by the apartment building several times, just sitting in his car, watching. He told himself he just wanted to see her, to understand why she had done this. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. The rage was building to something he couldn't control, something dangerous. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the annulment hearing. Reporters filled the back rows, cameras lined the hallway outside, and curious onlookers stood in line hours before the doors opened. Kelly sat at one table with Donald Ashford, his lawyer. Lucy sat at another table with Andrea Hollins, a sharp woman in her mid-40s who had built her career defending LGBTQ+ rights. They didn't look at each other. The judge called the court to order and made it clear this was a legal proceeding, not a circus. Donald stood first to present his opening argument. "Your Honor, this case is about informed consent. My client entered into a legally binding contract, marriage, based on fundamental misrepresentations. He was denied the right to make an informed choice. The respondent deliberately concealed her biological sex before the marriage. This is fraud." Andrea stood next. "Your Honor, gender identity is a protected characteristic under the law. My client is legally female. She broke no laws. Disclosure of medical history is not required for marriage. What we have here is a man who regrets his marriage and is using the legal system to punish a transgender woman for existing." Kelly was called to the stand first. He described the wedding night in graphic detail. Donald asked him directly, "How did that make you feel?" Kelly's voice shook. "I felt raped by deception. My consent was stolen from me. I would never have married her if I had known the truth." Andrea's cross-examination was aggressive. "Mr. Cross, did you ask Lucy about her anatomy before marriage?" Kelly looked at her like the question was absurd. "Why would I? She presented herself as a biological woman. I had no reason to question it." Andrea continued, "You've preached against transgender individuals from your pulpit. Is that correct?" Kelly hesitated. "Yes, I believe biological sex is determined by God and cannot be changed." Lucy took the stand the next day. She explained her history, her transition, her fear of rejection. Andrea asked why she didn't tell Kelly the truth. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. "I was afraid. I thought if I told him he'd leave. I believed that if we got married first, if he loved me first, then maybe it wouldn't matter." Donald's cross-examination was brutal. "You knew that Kelly Cross preached against transgender ideology. You heard those sermons. And you still chose to deceive him." Lucy tried to explain. "I thought if he fell in love with me first, his beliefs might change." Donald leaned forward. "But you didn't give him that choice, did you?" Pastor James testified about the prophecy and the church's role. Donald asked him point blank, "If you had known that Lucy Cross was transgender, would you have allowed this marriage?" Pastor James didn't hesitate. "No, we would not have." After 3 days of testimony, the judge made her ruling. The marriage was annulled on the grounds of fraud. Lucy was ordered to return all wedding gifts. No criminal charges were filed, but the judge awarded Kelly $25,000 in damages for emotional distress. Both parties were ordered to stay away from each other. Kelly had won, but he didn't feel victorious. He felt empty. The $25,000 didn't undo what happened. The rage was still there. Months passed. Kelly tried to move forward, but couldn't. Then one afternoon in early October, he received a phone call from a woman named Brielle Miller, an investigative journalist. "I've been investigating Pastor James Whitfield. I think you need to hear what I found. The prophecy he gave you about Lucy. I don't think it was real." Brielle explained what she had discovered. Pastor James had been having an affair years ago. Simone Carter, Lucy's best friend, had evidence of it. Simone had blackmailed Pastor James. She approached him privately and made him an offer. Prophecy that Kelly should marry Lucy, or she would expose the affair. Pastor James, terrified of losing his position and his marriage, agreed. The prophecy was fake. In Simone's mind, she was helping her friend to feel protected, validated, accepted. She orchestrated everything. When the article published, it exploded. Pastor James admitted everything in a public statement. "I bear full responsibility for setting these events in motion. I destroyed 2 lives to save my reputation. I will carry this guilt for the rest of my life." The fallout was immediate. He resigned. Criminal investigators looked into charges. Simone faced scrutiny for blackmail. Kelly read the article 3 times. He had been manipulated by everyone. Pastor James had lied. Simone had used him. Even God, or what he thought was God, had been a fabrication. His faith shattered completely. The rage reached a breaking point. Lucy needed to pay. Then, 3 weeks after the article published, Kelly received a text from an unknown number. It was from Lucy. "Can we talk? I just learned about Simone and Pastor James. I was used too. Please, let me explain." Kelly stared at the message. He typed out a reply. "Where?" Lucy sent her address. They agreed to meet November 8th. Evening. Kelly went to a sporting goods store and bought a hunting knife. He paid in cash. He told himself it was just for protection. But he knew that was a lie. Lucy opened the door wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt. She looked thinner, tired. When she saw Kelly, her face showed hope mixed with fear. She stepped aside and gestured for him to come in. The apartment was tiny. 1 room, minimal furniture, boxes stacked in the corner. She offered him something to drink. He said no. She started talking immediately, words tumbling out. "Thank you for coming. I needed you to know that I didn't know about Simone and Pastor James. I had no idea they were manipulating everything." Kelly didn't respond. Lucy continued, getting more emotional. "When I read that article, I felt sick. Simone was my best friend. I trusted her. She was using both of us. We were both victims, Kelly." She moved closer, her eyes pleading. "I know I hurt you. I should have told you the truth. But I didn't know about the prophecy being fake. I thought God really brought us together. I'm so sorry." Kelly finally spoke, his voice flat. "You think an apology fixes this?" Lucy shook her head. "No, but I needed you to hear it. I never meant to hurt you. I loved you." Kelly laughed without humor. "You don't know what love is. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't trap someone in a marriage based on fraud." Lucy's voice rose. "I know that now. But I was also being manipulated. Simone orchestrated everything." Kelly's eyes narrowed. "So now you're blaming Simone? You're saying it's her fault you lied?" Lucy backtracked. "No, I'm responsible for my choices. I just mean that we were both pawns." Kelly took a step toward her. Lucy instinctively stepped back. His voice had an edge now. "Let me tell you what I think happened. You knew exactly what you were doing. You heard my sermons and decided to deceive me anyway. You gambled that I would be too trapped by the marriage to leave." Lucy shook her head frantically. "That's not true. I just wanted to be loved." Kelly's voice got louder. "But you didn't let me choose. You decided you had the right to deceive me, to violate my consent." Lucy reached out toward him. "Kelly, please, can't we both just admit we were hurt? Maybe if we—" Kelly cut her off, shouting, "We were not both victims. You chose to lie. You destroyed my life, my faith, my future. Everything I built is gone because of you." Lucy was sobbing. "I know, And I'm sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." Kelly's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You don't have a life to spend." He pulled out the knife. Lucy's eyes went wide. She opened her mouth to scream, but nothing came out. "Kelly, please," she finally managed. "Please don't do this." She backed away toward the door. Kelly blocked her path. "You think you can just apologize and everything goes away?" He lunged forward. The knife went into her chest. Lucy screamed. She looked down at the knife, at the blood spreading across her shirt. He pulled it out and she fell backward. She tried to crawl away. Kelly followed. He stabbed her again and again. Lucy tried to fight back, kicked at him, clawed at his arms. But she was getting weaker. The blood was everywhere. Kelly kept stabbing. 17 times. Chest, stomach, arms, throat. Lucy's movements got slower. She tried to speak, but blood filled her mouth. Her eyes found Kelly's face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, blood bubbling from her lips. "I'm sorry." Then her eyes went vacant. Lucy Cross was dead. Kelly stood over her body, breathing hard. He was covered in blood. For a moment, he just stood there. Then reality set in. But instead of horror, he felt peace. The rage was gone. She had paid. He walked to the bathroom, washed his hands and face, cleaned the knife. He wrapped it in toilet paper and put it in his jacket. He left the apartment quietly. 3 blocks away, he threw the knife in a dumpster. He drove home, burned his clothes in the fireplace, showered, and went to bed. The landlord found Lucy's body the next morning. He called 911. Detective Camille Washington arrived with her partner, Detective Dante Hart. The crime scene was brutal. 17 stab wounds, no forced entry. The victim knew her attacker. They canvassed the building. One neighbor remembered seeing a black man enter Lucy's apartment around 7:30 p.m. The building had security cameras. The footage showed a man entering at 7:43 p.m. and leaving at 8:52 p.m. Camille pulled up Lucy's file. Kelly Cross, the ex-husband. She compared his photo to the footage. It could be him. She pulled Lucy's phone records. 3 days before the murder, Lucy had texted Kelly. They had arranged to meet November 8th, the night she died. They pulled Kelly's credit card records. A hunting knife purchase 2 weeks before. They found the knife in a dumpster 3 blocks away. Lucy's blood. Kelly's partial fingerprint. They arrested Kelly 48 hours after the murder. When he opened the door and saw the police, he didn't look surprised. "I know why you're here." At the station, he invoked his right to remain silent, but 6 hours later he asked to speak to the detectives. He confessed to everything. "I killed her. She destroyed my life. She deserved to die. I'd do it again. She took everything from me. My faith, my reputation, my future. I took her life. That's justice." He was charged with first-degree murder. The murder trial began 6 months later. The prosecution laid out the case, the history, the annulment, the conspiracy, the text messages, the murder. Crime scene. Photos made jurors look away. The defense argued extreme emotional disturbance. Kelly Cross is not a monster. He's a broken man who was pushed beyond his limits. He snapped. Detective Camille testified about the investigation. The forensic expert explained the wounds. Lucy had lived for several minutes, conscious, aware, feeling everything. Simone testified about the blackmail plot, crying as she admitted her role. Pastor James testified about the fake prophecy. "I set these events in motion, but I didn't tell Kelly to kill anyone. That was his choice." Kelly took the stand against his lawyer's advice. He described his mental state, the depression, the rage. The prosecution's cross-examination was brutal. They showed him the crime scene photos. "Did you need to stab her 17 times? Kelly's face showed no emotion. "She destroyed my life. She needed to pay." "So you believe you have the right to decide who lives and dies?" Kelly met his eyes. "I believe people should face consequences for their actions." She faced hers. Expert witnesses testified. The defense's psychologist said Kelly suffered severe trauma. The prosecution's psychologist said he still knew right from wrong. The planning, the knife purchase, the disposal of evidence, all showed clear thinking. Mental anguish did not excuse premeditated murder. The jury deliberated for 8 hours, guilty of first-degree murder. At sentencing, the judge acknowledged the extraordinary circumstances but said, "Nothing justifies taking another person's life. You had choices, Mr. Cross. You chose murder." Life without parole. Kelly showed no emotion as they led him away. Kelly Cross is incarcerated at a state prison. He keeps to himself, reading, isolated. In one interview, he said, "I have peace now. She can't hurt anyone else." Lucy Cross was buried in a small cemetery. About 20 people attended, mostly LGBTQ+ community members. Her gravestone reads, "Lucy Cross, 1994-2024, gone too soon." She has become a symbol in transgender rights debates, used by both sides to support their arguments. Pastor James was convicted of fraud, sentenced to 5 years probation, and stripped of his ministerial credentials. He lives quietly, working at a hardware store. He issued one statement: "I bear responsibility for setting these events in motion. I will carry this guilt for the rest of my life." Simone served 18 months for blackmail. She moved to a different state under a different name and reportedly struggles with guilt. Abundant Grace Ministries no longer exists. The church lost over 60% of its membership. The building was sold. The story has become a cautionary tale in evangelical circles. The case continues to be discussed in law schools and ethics courses. Public opinion remains divided. Some view Kelly as a victim driven to the breaking point. Others view him as a murderer. Some view Lucy as a manipulative deceiver. Others view her as a vulnerable woman killed for being transgender. The unanswered questions remain. Should Lucy have disclosed her status before marriage? Did Pastor James's manipulation reduce Kelly's culpability? Could this tragedy have been prevented? No one has answers. No one won. Kelly is in prison for life. Lucy is dead. Pastor James lost everything. Simone lost her freedom. Lives were destroyed, all because of secrets, lies, and rage. This is what happens when secrets destroy marriages and rage destroys lives. If this story shook you, you're not alone. Subscribe for more true crime investigations that go beyond the headlines. Hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below. Was Lucy wrong for hiding the truth? Was Kelly justified in his rage? Or was everyone manipulated? Where do you draw the line between victim and murderer? Let's discuss. See you in the next investigation.